I mentioned a couple weeks ago that one of the difficult things about studying Hebrews is that you really can't go section by section, because the writer is weaving together all of these complex ideas, and he sort of jumps around back and forth, in and out. And so what we're going to look at today actually comes up in 8 different chapters. Now, we obviously don't have time to cover all of that. We're not going to get to all 8 chapters. I know you're heartbroken. But we are going to cover a chunk of Scripture. So today, turn to Hebrews chapter 5. If you are borrowing one of our books from the chair in front of you, or Bibles from the chair in front of you, that's page 805, if that helps. So last week, we looked at Hebrews. Of course, we looked at Hebrews. We looked how in Hebrews, it makes a compelling case that Christians can stop being Christians, that once followers of Jesus can walk away from their salvation. Not that because of our sinfulness, God will abandon us or God will reject us, but instead that by our own choices, by our own neglect, or even by rejecting His grace later on, we can abandon Him. We can walk away. In Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14, it says this, "Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess." We must hold firmly to it. Now, that verse probably has greater impact on the people who were getting this letter first, the Jewish Christians from the first century, than it does on us because of this title that he gives to Jesus, the great high priest. Now, to us, we read that Jesus is the high priest, and it doesn't really have the impact on us like it should because we don't have a culture of priesthood anymore. There are some Christian traditions who still have a priesthood, but even that, it's not like what the Jewish Christians or the Jews had. It was a completely different thing. So when God gave the law through Moses to the Israelites, he established this priesthood through the tribe of Levi. And the priest's role was to facilitate the worship of God and to serve as intermediaries between God and the people. So what they did was they would offer the sacrifices. They would actually do the work of the sacrificing that the people would bring to God for all these different things that God had listed, fellowship offerings and sin offerings and all kinds of different things. And they would come to the tabernacle and later to the temple, and they would make sure that, and the priests would make sure that the people were coming in the proper way. There were all kinds of restrictions about who could come and worship. It had to be the right people. It had to be the people of God. It had to be they had to be without certain skin diseases or certain other ailments, things going on. And the priests were in charge of sort of gatekeeping, not because they didn't want people to worship God, but because they did want people to worship God in the proper way. And the high priest was the one above all the other priests. And among other things, he had the role of once a year going into the Holy of Holies. He would go behind the very thick curtain that separated the most holy place in the whole nation from everywhere else, and he would offer a sin sacrifice. He would offer atonement, not of his own. It was the blood of a bull, and he would go in once a year and he would sprinkle the blood of the bull on top of the Ark of the Covenant. It was a huge deal. Only Levite men could become priests, and only those who had been selected for being worthy and being trained well and knowing what they're supposed to do. And not every priest could be a high priest. The first high priest was Moses' older brother Aaron, and his descendants, his sons and sons and sons after that, sort of filled that role for generations. Priests were a vital part of the life of Israel. They were essential to it. They were meant to be the representatives between God and man. In fact, they were meant to represent man to God. And the high priest was a representative of all the priesthood. And so really, the representative of the whole nation. And so look at Hebrews chapter 5. We're going to start in verse 1. It says, "Every high priest is selected from among men and is appointed to represent them in matters related to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sin. He is able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and are going astray, since he himself is subject to weakness. This is why he has offered sacrifices, or he has to offer sacrifices for his own sins, as well as the sins of the people. And no one takes this honor on himself. He must be called by God, just as Aaron was. So Christ also did not take upon himself the glory of becoming a high priest. But God said to him, 'You are a son, or you are my son. Today I have become your father.' And he says in another place, 'You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek.' During the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with loud cries and tears to the one who could save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverent submission. Although he was a son, he learned obedience from what he suffered and was made perfect and became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, and was designated by God to be the high priest in the order of Melchizedek. I'm already thinking about that line. I was ahead in my head about that order of Melchizedek thing. That is a strange phrase. What does that even mean? Well, so in Genesis chapter 14, there's a story about how there's this great battle between 9 different kingdoms, 4 on one side and 5 on the other. And they came together and they fought, and one of the kings on the losing side, one of the kingdoms on the losing side, was the kingdom of Sodom, which is where Abraham's nephew Lot lived. And so the kings, the one, captured up the people, and they captured up Lot. And they took him back. And so when Abraham found out about it, he rallied his men together, and they went charging off to go defeat those kings and rescue Lot. And when they did, they got him back. They didn't just defeat them, they wiped them out, basically. They took back Lot, and they actually took back tons of spoils of war. They went all the way up to the far north part of the country to do this. And it's kind of amazing. If you look in in Genesis chapter 14, it says, after Abraham returned from defeating, I'm going to get this name wrong, Kedorlaomer. Did I get it? No? Okay, well, we'll pretend like we did. After defeating that guy and the kings that were allied with him, the king of Sodom came to meet him in the Valley of Kings. And then, and here we have it, Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram, whatever you want to call him, saying, blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand. Then Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. And that's it. That's all that we know about Melchizedek. That's all the Bible has to say about him. So this person that Jesus is referred to in Hebrews as a priest in the order of Melchizedek, we don't really know all that about him. In fact, the only time we see him again in the Old Testament is in Psalm 110, that the Hebrews writer is actually quoting here, and he's talking about Jesus. And if that's all we had to go on, that's not very much. I mean, that really wouldn't tell us anything about who Jesus is, but thankfully, the Hebrews writer expands on this idea. Now, for the rest of chapter 5, and for most of chapter 6, the Hebrews writer talks about something else. Remember I said he's taking these complex ideas and he's weaving them all over the place. It's not a linear thought. Remember, he doesn't think like us. He thinks like a Middle Eastern Jew in the first century as opposed to modernist Westerners in the 21st century. So we don't really think like he thinks. And so he skips some stuff. He moves on, starts talking about some other things. But then, thankfully, he comes back at the end of chapter 6, starting in verse 19. And he explains what he's talking. Look at what he says. He says, we have this hope as an anchor for our souls. What hope? Jesus. We have this hope as the anchor for our souls, firm and secure. It enters the inner sanctuary, behind the curtain, where Jesus, who went before us, has entered on our behalf. He has become a high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. This Melchizedek was the king of Salem and the priest of God Most High. He met Abraham, returning from the defeat of the kings, and blessed him, and Abraham gave him 1/10 of everything. First, his name means king of righteousness, and then also king of Salem means king of peace. Without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning or end of life, like the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. Just think how great he was. Even the patriarch Abraham gave him 1/10 of his plunder. Now, I don't talk that often about money in church. And there are some people who wish that I would talk more about it, and there's probably a lot of you who wish I would talk even less. But I would be remiss to not point out what it just says here. It's worth noting that Abraham gave Melchizedek a tithe, 1/10 of the plunder, and that Melchizedek is called a priest of God. This was centuries before Moses set up this idea that the Israelites would bring 1/10 of their increase, a tithe, to the temple as part of their worship and part of being a part of the community, and to take care of the priests and to take care of worship and to facilitate the ministry of God. This was centuries before that. And so you've probably heard about churches that say that you have to have a tithe. In church, you're supposed to give a tithe of your income, your increase, right? You heard that? Anybody been told that before? Some people have said that's a requirement for Christians. Some churches teach that you are required to give a tenth. I'm gonna take care of that for you. It's not a requirement. We're not required. That's the old covenant. We're no longer under the old covenant. We are under and living in the new covenant in Jesus. And some have said that because the tithe predates the law, because Abraham gave a tithe to Melchizedek, that tells us that we should continue to give a tithe. But you have to understand that this passage is descriptive, not prescriptive. It's not commanding us what to do, it's telling us what happened. It serves as an example. Having said that, I think it's a really good example. I think it's a very good example because I make it a practice to give a tenth of my income to the work of ministry here at Promise Point. And when I can, an offering above and beyond that. And I don't do it because I'm compelled to. I do it because I get to. I don't even actually give it to Promise Point. I mean, it goes to the bank account and it goes to fund things that are going on, but it's not because I really love Promise Point. Don't get me wrong, I love Promise Point. I love you guys. But I don't do it because I love this building or because I love our programs or because I love our music. All those things I do love, but that's not why I give. I give it like I'm giving it to Jesus, the high priest in the order of Melchizedek. It's an honor for me to give to him. And that's exactly what Abraham did. And so I think that you should consider it, not as a command, not as a requirement, but as a good idea. And in fact, I would encourage you to ask me later how this has affected my life, because it's been a good thing. I really want you to notice the parallels between Melchizedek and Jesus. So his name, Melchizedek, his name is King of Righteousness. That is a title for Jesus. In fact, my favorite detail, I just love this, is that he is called a king, or really a prince of Salem, or Salam, or Shalom, peace. He is the Prince of Peace. That's just amazing to me. You know, he has no beginning, he has no lineage, he has no end. He is a priest forever. He's like Jesus, no beginning and no end. And the writer is doing what I've mentioned before. He's taking a person that the Jewish Christians would have revered, and then he's elevating Jesus on top of him. Remember, first it was David, King David. He said, someone wrote somewhere, and he was quoting King David. Of course, all the people listening would have known it was King David. And so he says, no, but Jesus is above that. And then it was Moses. Oh my gosh, did they love Moses? He gave the law. He made them a nation. He was God's representative on earth. Everybody was compared to Moses. No, Jesus is above that. And now it's even Abraham, their patriarch. Nobody was above Abraham. Oh, but wait. Melchizedek was. Jesus is. See, here's the thing. The Hebrew writer is doing something that we've got to get. We've got to grasp this. This is so important, we can't miss it. Jesus is superior to everyone. Jesus is superior to everything. We need to wrap our brains around that reality. And in fact, we need to lock it into our hearts and hold it there. It is so important that we get this. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, yeah, Dave, yawn. We know. We've heard this our whole lives. I'm not sure we really get it. I'm not sure we really hold Jesus as superior to all things in our lives. But he is. The writer wants us to know that he is. Look down at chapter 7, verse 20. Where am I? Chapter 6, verse 20. I'm in the wrong place. What have I done? I've skipped the whole passage here. I'm sorry, I'm lost. I'll start over. Hey, everybody. Okay. I think this is just wrong. I think this is just saying, here it is. Sorry, I was looking at something I'd already read. Starting in verse 20, it's actually the second verse of verse 20. Aren't you glad we're not so professional that we take ourselves too seriously? I just want us to always be that. I want us to take the word seriously, but not ourselves. Sound good? Okay, let's take Jesus seriously. So here, starting in verse 20, it says, Others became priests without an oath. But he, being Jesus, became a priest with an oath when God said to him, "The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever." Because of this oath, Jesus has become the guarantee of an even better covenant. Now, there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in their office. There had to be many priests. Why? Because they kept dying. Yeah? But look at verse 24. It says, "But Jesus lives forever. He has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Such a high priest meets our needs, one who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priest, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priests men who came after the law, men who were weak, but by the oath, which came after the law, appointed the Son," look at this, "who has been made perfect forever." Jesus is exalted. Jesus is superior. Jesus is supreme. Verse 8 says the point we're trying to make is this. What we're trying to say is this. We do have such a high priest who sat down at the right hand of the throne of the majesty of heaven, who serves in the sanctuary, the true tabernacle set up by the Lord, not by men. See, every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices, and so it was necessary for this one also to have something to offer. If he were on earth, he would not be a priest, for there are already men who offer gifts prescribed by the law. They serve at a sanctuary that is a copy and a shadow of the one in heaven. This is why Moses warned when he was building the tabernacle, "See to it that you make everything according to the pattern shown to you on the mountain." But the ministry Jesus has received is as superior to theirs as the covenant of which he is a mediator is superior to the old one. It is founded on better promises. Jesus is superior. Jesus is above it all. And we have to understand this. We have to grasp this. And not just as an intellectual exercise. It needs to become a reality in our hearts and our souls and our daily lives. Jesus is superior and above all things. And we have to get this because of what I'm getting ready to say next. Now, I don't want you to get confused. I don't want you to get hung up on the language here. In Hebrews, you're going to find language that might say things that sound a little off. Things like Jesus learned obedience from what he suffered, or that he was made perfect. Remember, don't think like a modernist Westerner. Think like a first century Middle Easterner. You with me? He is not saying here that Jesus had to learn to be submissive or had to learn through suffering in the way that we would think about it. He's not saying that Jesus had to become perfect like he wasn't perfect before. What the Hebrew writer's doing here is he's drawing a parallel between Jesus and us. He's showing us what Jesus is to us and who we are because of him. He's saying that Jesus has done for us what we could not do for ourselves. We couldn't learn obedience. We can't learn obedience through suffering. Why? We're always trying to get out of suffering. We are always begging God to remove the suffering. And even when he doesn't, we whine about it. But Jesus was able to suffer and submit to God by saying, "Not my will, but yours be done." Jesus didn't have to be made perfect. See, we can't be made perfect. Our sin, it doesn't just cover us, it stains us. But Jesus, because he is perfect, died in our place and was raised back to life so that he could be back restored to his perfect position that he started from in the first place. What the Hebrew writer is saying is, this is the God that you serve. He is what you couldn't be. We have got to hold on to this idea that Jesus is superior in all areas of our lives, because the writer already said some stuff about Jesus in Hebrews chapter 2 and 4. He says, "Since the children have flesh and blood." Who's he talking about there? Us. We are the children, right? "Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might destroy him who holds the power of death and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. Look at verse 17. It says, for this reason, he had to be made like his brothers in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in the service to God, that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. Because he himself suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. Look at chapter 4. It says, therefore, since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, and yet was without sin. We have to hold fast to this idea, this reality, that Jesus is superior, so that we understand what it means that he chose to become like us. He didn't have to, but because he did, he gets us. When we suffer, he understands, because he's suffered too. He's been through what you've been through. He's lost loved ones. He's been betrayed. He's wondered if he was going to eat that day. He struggled. He knows your struggles. When you suffer, he understands you. He doesn't just sympathize, he empathizes because he suffered too. And when we're tempted, he understands what that's like. He understands the war within our soul that pulls at us between what we want to do and what we know is right. And so he understands that sometimes we're going to lose that fight. And when we lose that fight, he doesn't condemn us because he understands he was tempted too. He understands the gravitational pull of temptation. He understands how hard sometimes it is to resist. And he doesn't condemn us for it. He understands our weakness. He understands us. The great King of glory, superior to all things, the Almighty One, the Holy God, the Exalted One, understands us because he's been like us. Not from afar, but in this up close and personal way. When we fail, when we give in to temptation, when we tread on his grace and we act like the cross meant nothing, he doesn't hate us for it. He has compassion on us and sympathy for us. And he restores us. He beckons us to come to him and say, don't keep away from me because you weren't good enough. I'm good enough. In fact, Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16, it says, let us approach then the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Our great high priest intercedes for us every single day, every single moment. He calls us to his throne, knowing that through him we can actually have all the grace we could ever need. We have to hold on to that reality. Hebrews 3 says, therefore, holy brothers who share in the heavenly calling, fix your thoughts on Jesus, the apostle and high priest whom we confess. Because Jesus is superior to all things, he's superior to our weakness. He's superior to our death. And he brings us back to life. He sets us free. So I have a difficult question for you. And it's not difficult because it's confusing. It's difficult because it cuts to the heart of the matter. Is Jesus superior over all things in your life? Don't answer that question too quickly. Take some time to really think about it. Explore the dark corners of your life that you don't like to look at. Does Jesus take precedence over everything else? Have you surrendered everything to his authority? Because most of us, that's a hard thing to do. We surrender by degrees. I say all the time that surrender is the hardest thing you'll ever do. It just is. Why? We like to be in charge. We like to get our way. And honestly, we like to think that we can fix it. We like to think that when we get it wrong, then we can work it out. And we can work off our sin. And when we do, then we'll go to God and say thank you. He didn't call us to that. He calls us to bring all of our brokenness to Him and boldly approach the throne of grace and say, thank you that you understand that I am flawed, I am weak, I am fallen, but you make me holy. That's what our confidence is in. So I'm asking you, my challenge to you is this: let the great high priest do what only he can do. Let him have authority over every aspect of your life. Let Jesus be the most important reality in your life, and let it affect every part of who you are and everything you do. Everything. God, you are good to us, even when we don't get it. And you make it very easy for us to come, and we make it so very difficult. In fact, you, being superior to everything, stepped down. You humbled yourself. You made yourself like us, taking on the nature of a servant, and you freed us from slavery. Slavery to death, slavery to sin. God, I pray that you would remind us every day of your exalted nature, but also remind us that you, above all things, lift us up to you. You don't wait for us to climb up. You don't stand afar and stand aloof and say, well, if they get to me, then they can be with me. You stoop down and you scoop us up and you bring us to yourself. You redeem us, you make us holy. Help us to have confidence in that. Help us hold on to the reality that you are greater than it all. And you are worthy of it all. You are worthy of everything we can do. You are worthy of our sacrifice. You are worthy of our work, or worthy of our worship. You are worthy to be lifted high, to be recognized for your high position, to be seen for who you are. I pray, God, that you would move our hearts and our minds toward you today. In Jesus' name.